Today is the 5th of November 2010. We are in Westmere, New York. My name is Wayne Clarke. I'm with the New York State Military Museum. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
Yeah, Bron Jenssen. I'm 87. I was born in September 23rd, 1923 in New York City. And my mother, father, and sister were born in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 boys born to them, and I was the third boy born in this country. And so I'm of Norwegian descent.
Mm-hmm. Did you attend school in New York City?
I attended school in New York City and went to the High School of Music and Art that was set up by Fiorello H. LaGuardia. He had aviation schools, and he had art schools, and schools for the performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
And the people took tests. The students had to be recommended by their teachers first to take the tests. And after they were recommended, they took the tests. My 2 brothers went to the school for mechanics and that sort of thing. And
what kind of art did you study?
I studied fine arts to begin with, and I studied mostly fine arts. My mother was a painter.
Mm-hmm.
And she painted in Norway before she came to this country. She has paintings in the museum in Oslo. When we came to America, and she was painting here, she has paintings in the Brooklyn Museum. And she befriended other people in the arts, people in the performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
And whatnot. And they had a Norwegian, a group of Norwegians who were ballet dancers and artists and singers and opera singers and whatnot. And those people were around the house on Sundays for dinner and whatnot. Not all of them, but you know,
Mm-hmm.
over the years when they're back and forth. And so it was a wonderful group of people to grow up with.
Mm-hmm. Now, was your father living at the time?
My father was living at the time. He came over to the United States at the same time my mother did in 1902. And when he was on Ellis Island, they asked him what country he came from and all that business, and what do you do? And he said, what was your schooling? Oh, he said, I'm an electrical engineer. The guy said, you're what? He said, I'm an electrical engineer. He said, wait a minute, just stay there, I'll be right back. So he came back and he said, I got a job for you if you'd like it. He said, they're electrifying Manhattan Island. And there's a guy there, Thomas Edison, who's doing the job, and he would like to hire you to help and to get the barrow electrified. He said, it sounds like an interesting job. And his mother was English. His father operated a ship between New York and the Caribbean in certain times of the year, and during when it was winter or closer to winter, he operated between there and England. He brought
Mm-hmm.
things to England and took things back and whatnot. And he met this English woman, and they liked each other, and every time he came there, he took her out to dinner, and they walked around London and did different things, and they decided that they'd like to get married. And then they said, well, where do you want to live? she said, I think I'd like to live in Norway, but why don't we go up, I'll go up there with you and take a look around. And he took her up. And he and his family had 4 brothers, and mother and the father. Mother had died. And she said, hey, this is a great place, this is nice. She said, I'd like to live up here. So they got married and lived up there, and they had their 5 children, five boys. And living on an island in the fjord, he rowed to land to go to school in the summer, and in the wintertime he ice skated. They ice skated to school. And so it was interesting. But my father and the boys spoke English exactly like their mother. And when he came to the United States, and here he was in Ellis Island and whatnot, and they said, you said you're Norwegian. He said, well, of course I'm Norwegian. What do you think I am? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, he said. It's the first time anybody ever told me that I'm English. I'm Norwegian, he said. And so all of the boys spoke English that way, just like their mother. And here he was in New York, and he took the job that Edison had given him. And it was electrifying the streets and putting up electricity. And they gave him a crew, and he started about 55th Street going north. And after about 5 or 6 or 7 days, a couple of people came up to see what he was doing. And they said, Mr. Jenssen, how are things coming along up here? Oh, he said, quite well. He said, I think we're doing a good job. They said, well, do you mind if we take a look and see what you're doing? He said, no, go right ahead. And they came back about 15 minutes later, and they said, this was during the day, because they were doing all of this. And no lights were on at the time. He said, we don't see any, we can't see what you have done here. What have you done? He said, what do you mean? He said, well, we don't see any poles up or anything. Oh, he said, I don't use the poles. He said, I don't put up any poles. He said, they haven't paved the streets here or anything, so I just put all the wires underground. And I have this thing that I've scaled out for you and shown exactly where all the wires are. The guy said, he said, you're doing what? He said, I'm putting all the wires underground. The guy said, what are you crazy or something? He said, well, we'll see you later. And they left. And they come back in about 5 or 6 days, and the guy came up and he said, okay. He said, you just go right ahead and put them underground. He said, they took down all the poles that they had up to 56th Street, took down all the poles, put all the wires underground. And to this day in Manhattan Island, there's not one electrical pole. Everything, all of the electricity is underground. And that was because of my old man. And Edison liked him so much, he kept him on his crew. And for all of the years that he was with Edison, he didn't do electrical work like most of the others. But if Edison had something that was a little trickier, or whatever it was that he was working on, or a building that they were putting electricity in and whatnot, they'd call my old man, and my old man would come in and work with the crew and help them. And that's what he did. That's what he did for all his life.
Interesting. Now, what year did you graduate from high school?
That was interesting. I'd say that it was, let me see.
Now, you said you were 18 when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Were you out of school then, or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I was out of school for a couple of years then. And
Were you working or going to college?
I was working. I was working. My sister was an animator, making films for the Popeyes and Betty Boops.
Uh-huh.
If you ever hear of the Popeyes and Betty Boops?
Yep.
Well, she made the Popeyes. She worked on the Popeyes and Betty Boops, and I worked with her on Saturdays when I wasn't in school and when I wasn't working somewhere else. I worked in the animating place with her, and that was some Jewish guys, the Fleischmans, and they were doing all of the filming work in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the motion pictures at the time were made in Long Island before they went out to. Well, there was long before that when they were making motion pictures in New York. They were making motion pictures in New York around the turn of the century,
Mm-hmm.
and then they moved everything to the West Coast because of the climate and whatnot. It was much better for year-round
Mm-hmm.
photography work, as you know. And but the animating part was still in New York. Was still in New York, and the company was doing all kinds of lovely things and wonderful things. And the only thing about Fleischman, he didn't like artists that acted like artists. They didn't like them. He didn't like them if they drank too much or if they did this too much or whatever the hell they were doing. If they were doing it too much, no matter how good they were, he'd fire them. And if they were fired, they knew that they could get a job from a guy in California by the name of Disney, who was hiring people just like that. People, good, talented people who didn't fit into the pattern of working in an office, so to speak. And by doing that, he developed a very beautiful studio, taking these capable people and letting them do what the hell they wanted to do. So that's how that developed anyway. But I worked in the studio a little bit on Saturdays in New York.
Mm-hmm.
They liked what I did, and I come in one day and sat beside my sister, and she was doing her work, and she gave me a couple of sheets and said, you can do this stuff. Just you can see what I'm doing. He said, make a couple of sketches, do a couple of sites. I said, make a couple of sketches. And so they said, who made those sketches? He said, oh, that's my brother made those sketches. Can we hire him? Oh, no, he said, he's still going to school, he's doing that and that. But they said, well, get him up here on Saturdays or Sundays when we're busy, and he can be doing some stuff. So that's how I started doing things and that.
Now, were you working there when the Pearl Harbor was attacked?
No, by then, there was a friend of my sister's that had a studio.
Mm-hmm.
He had a studio in New York, and he was doing work for NBC and CBS and those radio and things at the time. And they were big accounts.
Mm-hmm.
You had the big radio stations. That was a big thing then. The radio was that was before television and all. And so I got a job working, doing that kind of stuff. And I did some work and was doing some work for him. And I was doing the work that he wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a window. It was on 46th Street, overlooking what was then the 2nd Avenue L, which is torn down now, and then the 3rd Avenue L, and then the all the big buildings and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd look out the window and I was making sketches of the stuff outside. He said, "Hey, this is great stuff." You know? So before you know it, he was getting me to do different things. And after about 3 months, this was during the Depression. That was the Depression. Nobody was making anything. Very few people. My father was working, and there were lots of people working, but it was like now. There were a lot of people that weren't working because of the height of the Depression. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt had just become president, and things were happening, but not too much. And
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Yes, precisely. I was up in New Haven. I was up in New Haven. I had an apartment up there. There's a very wealthy guy who had seen some of my work in New York, and he said, you know, the school that I went to had a beautiful art section, training artists. He said, Yale University. And he said, I want to take you up there. I want to take you up there and have you meet some of the people that work up there. And so, well, we had some lunches in New York together and whatnot, and he was seeing the kind of work that I'd been doing and whatnot. So I took some of my work together and as a portfolio and brought it up there. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to the people at Yale, and they looked at my work, and they had the Yale School of Fine Arts, and looked at all my stuff and said, well, we'd like to have you come up and go to school here. It'd be very nice. And I think you'd really appreciate it yourself. And I stayed up there long enough that they set me up with an apartment. And things were going pretty smooth there for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And this was during the summer. Mm-hmm. And the school wasn't supposed to start until the fall. And how did that work out with Pearl Harbor? Oh, Pearl Harbor had been hit. Pearl Harbor had been hit. And I was up there. Mm-hmm. And then I was drafted. My mother called me up and she said, I have it in the mail today. You've been drafted into the service. You have to come down here. So I took everything and put everything together.
Now that you got drafted into the Army?
Into the Army, yeah. And Yaphank, Long Island. They sent us out to Yaphank, Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Lewis was in the same group with myself, the boxer,
Yeah.
and some other people. And there we were, everybody in all the people who were drafted in Manhattan, in New York City, went to New York. They took their subways to New York, to Grand Central Station. And that was and they had a whole thing set up on the ground floor. When the people came in and you wrote everything down, and you told them who you were and what your age was and where you were drafted, and you showed them the thing that said you were supposed to be here. And by the afternoon we got on a train and we were shipped out to Yaphank, Long Island. That's where in World War I, "This is the Army, Mr. Jones," that was written in Yaphank.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, did you have your basic there, or they just
no,
processed you there?
There it is. We put uniforms on. They got uniforms and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I had a World War I hat, and a jacket that was from World War I, and the rest was World War II stuff. And they didn't really have. It didn't take them very long before everything straightened that stuff out. But the first morning, we all went to bed. 4 o'clock in the morning, all the bells rung in the barracks. Everybody out, everybody fall out in the West Wing, fall out in the West Wing. Everybody got dressed up and fall out in the West Wing, standing there. And they called everybody out in alphabetical order. This is the KP. Everybody that I call out, that's kitchen police. KP. They got them alphabetically. They got to Jordan. Jordan, he said, he stood up and he said, we were all standing up. He straightened out and he said, "I have to take the aviation cadet test." He said, "Okay, back to the barracks." He said, "Jensen." I said, "I have to take the aviation cadet test." He said, "Okay, back to the barracks." Everybody else went to KP, and we went back to the barracks. I got back to the barracks, took my clothes off, went to bed. About 8 o'clock in the morning, this guy Jordan is shaking me up. I said, "What the hell is going on?" He said, "You got to get up." He said, "You got to take the aviation cadet test." I said, I told him that so I wouldn't have to take the KP. They said, if they find out that you didn't take the aviation cadet test, you're going to have KP for the whole war.
So you went and took the
so
test.
I went and took the test with him, and then I come back to the barracks, and about 10 o'clock he comes back to the barracks, long face. I said, "What the hell happened to you?" He said, "I didn't pass." Oh, I said, "That's too bad." He said, "How did you make out?" I said, I didn't hand it in. I said, "I just left it in there." So I just left it in the where I wrote it out. I just put it in the side. They said, "Boy, when they get you, wait till they go out there and they find out that you didn't even hand it in. You'll be having KP for the whole war. You don't forget it." So at about 11 o'clock, Jensen, report to headquarters. He said, "They got you. Now they got you. You're going to have KP for that whole war." So I went into headquarters. As soon as I walked in, got up and he come over to me and he said, "Let me shake your hand." He said, "You're an aviation cadet." So that's how I got into the flying business.
So where did they send you after that?
We were sent down to Tennessee. We got sent, all of the people in New York and all over the country were sent down to Tennessee at a large grouping place where they had you took all kinds of tests down there.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you got there, they had tests for every possible thing that you can possibly think of. You took all these tests, and I must have retained information pretty good, and I was always good at math,
Mm-hmm.
and that helped me out in other things too, in navigation and how to look at maps. And
So as a cadet, were they going to train you to be a pilot, or?
Well, they all of the tests you took down in Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and you took the test and they interrogated you on all the different things. And so finally I got into one section, and I sat down chatting with this guy, and he shook my hand. He said, "I'm so-and-so, and I'm Colonel so-and-so, and I just want to chat with you for a couple of minutes." And I'm talking to him for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, say, and things seem to be going along pretty good. The light fixture goes out right above his desk. And I looked up at the light fixture and looked over in the corner of the room, and I noticed that the door had been ajar slightly, and there were some bulbs and other things in that closet. So I said, sit there for a minute. Don't worry about it. And I went over and I got a bulb, got in my chair and put it up there, and got it on top of the desk, unscrewed the
Mm-hmm.
thing, put the new bulb in, screwed it back on, and I sat down again. He was quiet for a minute. I said, now we can get on with our whatever we were chatting about. He said, no, that was a part of that whole light fixture thing. That was a part of the whole conversation that we had.
Oh.
He said, I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm trying to find out your moods and how you are, how you react, and how you reacted to different things,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a part of it. He said, as soon as that light went out, he said, you got right up and you said, look, I know where there's a bulb over there. And my two brothers too, they knew all about bulbs,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad was an electrical man himself, so that was easy for me. And he said, the way you did that, he said, because you had to be classified. He said, you were classified as a pilot, but we had to find out what you were going to be in heavy bombers or in this, that, and
Mm-hmm.
fighter pilots. And he said, you're going to be a fighter pilot. He said, with the type of background you have and the way you react, I feel that would be the place for you to be, because if something happened in the aircraft, that you didn't have 9 other people around, you didn't have that, you'd be able to do what you'd have to do to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
If it was correctable, you'd be able to do it. And so he said, let me shake your hand. And that was the end of that one. And so then we went into flight school, and we had biplanes that were built in 1934, and biplanes, Stearmans. They were Stearmans,
Mm-hmm.
and they had 220 horsepower engine on them, open cockpits, two cockpits, one for the instructor and one for the student. And there were 92 kids in our class. And out of the 92 kids, I was the third one to solo out of the 92 kids. And you didn't put you had your helmet on, but you didn't put your goggles on your helmet until you soloed. Before that, the goggles were around your neck.
Oh.
So when you soloed, you were able to put the goggles on in your helmet. And that was okay. Coming along pretty good for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. I guess about 2 months in flying. And my brother, my middle brother, was drafted about a year before the war started. And he was out in the Midwest at a field that wasn't far away from where I was flying. And he had come over a couple of weekends, and we had gone back and forth, and he had a place where I could communicate with him, because he had been in the service for more than a year and a half by then. And he called me up. He called me up one morning, and they were training in tanks. And his buddies, a group of his buddies had been sent over to Africa, the first groups of Americans that went over into Africa fighting against the Germans. And lo and behold, his best friend who was with him over here in the United States, Fort Knox, Kentucky. That was the big tank school. And had been killed in Africa. That was his best friend. That was about 2 weeks after he had landed in Africa. Because the Germans had marvelous tanks. They had beautiful, beautiful tanks. And we had sent over tanks that were built in the... We didn't start even building. Maybe the Ford Motor Company was building some tanks. But most of them were tanks that were in the 30s that were built. And there were no match for the German ones. And he was killed immediately. So I got up this morning, and my brother had called me up and told me that his best buddy had been killed, and he was in very, very bad shape. And after talking with him for about half an hour, he got me in a condition where I wasn't in too good a shape, and particularly thinking of him being killed in a tank that was made 8 or 10 years before then, that it was no match for what the Germans had. And here's me flying in an airplane that was built in 1934, and I'm training in an airplane made in 1934 to, in a couple of years, going over and flying against the Germans with their Messerschmitts and whatnot. And even they were approaching, that the Italians already had the ships that we have here today. The Germans, the Italians, who were ahead of Hitler as far as the air was concerned. Because in the 30s, in automobiles, they had all the racing cars, and they had all those things, and they had the ships that were without propellers and whatnot that they were using over there. here's me thinking, I got a 1934 airplane that I'm flying. I don't know how many months I'll be doing this, and I'll be all flying against these Italian planes that are. So when I got out that morning and I come out to the airfield to fly that day, they said, "Okay, let's go. Come on." What? He said, "You're supposed to be up in another 10 minutes." So I said the stupidest thing that I had ever said in my life, and I wish I could have retracted what I had said, but I said it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said my brother's best friend, he's at Fort Knox, and they had sent over a whole group of his people to Africa, fighting against the Germans in the desert there, and his best buddy was killed in a tank yesterday. I said, I just don't feel like flying today. That's all. I don't. I said, you don't feel like flying because your brother's best friend was killed in the war? I said, yeah. I said, I don't feel like it. I don't have that feeling. The guy said, okay. He said, go back to your tent. Go back to your barracks. Next morning, look on the bulletin board, they called me in. And they said, you're out of the program. He said, well, I said, what do you mean I'm out of the program? He said, well, he said, you refused to fly yesterday because your brother's best friend was killed in the war. I said, they said, well, what the hell do you think you're flying for? Training to go into the war.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. So, but they wanted me to stay in the flight program anyway. And so I was trained to do other things on the aircraft. And
So did you stay right there, or?
No. I went to St. Louis, where we were trained in navigation.
Mm-hmm.
And other things that pertain to flying, and I ended up on a crew after a while, and I had gone out to various places to I had gunnery training. I had engineering training. I had anything else that pertained to flying an aircraft or maintaining an aircraft in flight. And so after I finished that type of training,
Mm-hmm.
I was sent to a place where they made crews. They put the crews together, and all of the members of the crew, of the various students that were going to become part of the crew, got together, and they got to be friends, and they could live together and all that business. And then we were put in aircraft, and we were flying, and we flew together.
Now, what kind of aircraft was it?
They were B-17s. They were B-17s. And
Now, when was this? What year and what month approximately?
that was in the, I guess that was in the latter part of 1943. The latter part of 1943.
And then you trained a little more and then went overseas?
Well, before we went overseas, to get the crews to to work together.
Mm-hmm.
They sent our crew. They sent our crew to be on the East Coast, flying from Maine down to Florida, back and forth with light bombs for German submarines.
Oh.
German submarines were coming in. They were coming into New York Harbor and the Boston Harbor and up and down, and they were staying offshore for transports, ships coming in and out,
Mm-hmm.
and they were torpedoing boats all right practically coming into New York Harbor and whatnot. And so we were bombing the submarines up and down that perimeter, and they took us. We were doing our job quite well, and they took us and they put us in the Caribbean. They wanted us to go all the way down to the south part of South America, all the way up to Florida and back, flying that route. So we flew all the way through the islands and all the way down and back and forth during those days.
How long did you do that for?
We did that for about 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if you actually got any hits on any of the subs? Or?
We bombed, and whatever we hit went down.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going so fast that by the time something came up, we weren't there anymore.
Uh-huh.
And but we were stationed in different islands. And we were in Cuba. We were in Cuba, and Batista was the head of Cuba at the time, and Havana was gorgeous. That was the place to go,
mm-hmm.
and that hadn't changed yet. The Havana, Cuba was wide open, and it had.
No, you landed at the airport and you got
his airport, the airport that he built. Batista himself
mm-hmm.
built this airport for himself outside of Havana. That was the most beautiful airport that you've ever seen in your life, with the palm trees, and the runway came in, and it didn't touch any of the grass or anything. Where the runway stopped, palm trees and everything, beautiful. And our ship, it was just our one aircraft that was operating in that
mm-hmm.
particular section. And after our morning flights, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we landed at his field and
mm-hmm.
parked it. That was the only American ship there. And parked it, and then we went in, and there under the palm trees, sitting under the palm trees, and we got some nice stuff, and sitting under the palm trees. I say, this is the life. This is really it. And
now, how long were you there for?
well, we were there at that time for maybe a week or so, and
Now, where did you sleep? In like a hotel or?
No, we had that had been part of it. Part of that field had been built by the American engineers, so we had a place to sleep. So another we were flying B-24s at the time, and another B-24 flew in, and he said, "What the hell is it? What the hell is another B-24 doing here?" And it flew right up onto the field, come right up and parked next to our ship, which was like across the street there, you know, about like across the street. And this lady gets out of it. The lady gets out of the airplane. She's walking over. And as she gets closer, I said, that's Eleanor Roosevelt. Sure enough, it was Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh my God.
She came over and she sat with us, sat down with us, and she introduced herself to all 10 of us. Very pleased to meet you, and you're doing a marvelous job, and it's great having you down here. And she come back from the Pacific. She'd been over there visiting troops, and she flew back over the Panama Canal and whatnot and landed there. And from there she was going up to Washington. And she asked if what could she do for the various children, could she do for each of one of us, you know? And so when it came to me, I said, my mother reads your column in the New York Times every day, and our family all voted for the Roosevelts. I said, if you wrote a letter to my mother, I said that would be the biggest thing that I could ever do for my mother, and she'd appreciate it very much. Oh, she said, okay, I can do that. Just give me your address and give me all the information. I gave it to her and whatnot. And a couple of weeks later, when we left Cuba and come up, and we were in Washington, flying out of Washington, and I come home and I call my mother, and I said, did Eleanor Roosevelt ever send you one? Oh, she said, there was a 2-page letter.
Oh my God.
I show it to you. And she showed it to me, and she said, I met your son, and he was doing his work down there and doing what he was supposed to do. Marvelous flight crew, and they looked like they were very happy and content in what they had to do at the particular moment. And years later, after the war, living up in South Egremont, Massachusetts, we sold our home in New York and had moved up there. And up at the music festival that went on all summer up there, they had Eleanor Roosevelt come up to do the verbal work on a performing arts thing. So I took my mother up there, and I got up there early and got about two hours before the play was supposed to go on. The performance, Tanglewood.
Tanglewood, yes.
Tanglewood.
Yep.
And they said, sure, you can come in and see her. She said, it's all right if you come in. And then when I came in, I shook her hand, and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm from down in Cuba, Batista Field. Oh, she said, I remember you. I said, you wrote that lovely letter to my mother, and my mother is outside.
Oh my God. And
she'd love to meet you. And Eleanor said, well, bring her in, for goodness sake, take her in. So I took my mother in, my mother came in, and the three of us sat there and talked for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And just on a person-to-person talking about her husband and her boys and how everything was. And so that was great. My mother thought that was tip-top.
Oh my God, yes.
So that was nice. That was a nice thing. So that was my highlight of the flying in the islands down there.
And then eventually you went overseas?
Then from there we got back here, got back to the States, and and we were stationed we were stationed in Massachusetts, right over the border, at an airfield over there.
Oh, that be Westfield?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, Westover.
Westover.
It was at Westover Field, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were practicing there, and I had the kid from what's the guy's name now? I told you.
Oh, the fellow you.
Yeah, the fellow from up in Saratoga. And I told his mother that I'd get him home.
Uh-huh.
I said, don't worry, I'll get him home, you know. So I went over there. He and after the war, he invited me over. He said, come on over. So I come over and had a hell of a time. Had a hell of a time there. I stayed there for almost a week. And he had a Chris Craft. His family had a Chris Craft on the lake up there, on the big lake.
Oh, up in Saratoga.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we went up and flew off and used the yacht off the thing and met his mother again and whatnot.
Hmm.
And then when the racetrack opened, he and his family had seats.
Mm-hmm.
And so went up to the racetrack and always and then sit in the back seats with everybody. But his mother really took good care of me because I had gotten him home, you know.
Now, when did they send you overseas?
We went over on. I was home on a furlough. I was home on a furlough. It was the 10th. January, February, March, April. It was April 15th. It was the April 15th, and I was home on a furlough.
Mm-hmm.
And they called me up. The plane was down in Washington. And they called everybody who was on a furlough back. So I was home on the furlough for about 7 or 8 days, I guess, and they called everybody back. And we got into the airplane, and that was it, and shipped us out.
So you flew over to Europe.
Flew over to the Caribbean.
Oh, to the Caribbean.
Down to we flew over the southern route.
Oh, okay. And then to Africa?
Yeah, we flew to Brazil first.
Uh-huh.
Over the jungle, over the Brazilian jungle,
Mm-hmm.
to and to the port city. Flying over the jungle in Africa there, in Brazil. I took pictures of the people those people were living in the jungle there. They were jungle people.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know it, but when I enlarged the pictures and took them home, and they were blowing guns at us. They hadn't seen airplanes.
Ah.
They hadn't seen airplanes. And what the hell an airplane was.
Now, did you fly overseas on a brand new plane, or did you fly?
Brand new? No, it wasn't a brand new plane. In fact, in the Caribbean, on the way down, and we landed once on one of the islands. And because we had to make one stop
Mm-hmm.
to get over the Brazilian jungle, we didn't have enough fuel to fly from Florida to. So we landed and we hit a the most ridiculous thing. We just took off from Florida, and about an hour out of Florida on our flight, we went right into a hurricane.
Oh.
And those airplanes, they just had aluminum, and the aluminum was stapled together. They didn't have anything inside of them at all. They didn't. That was the exterior of the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
You got into that hurricane, and it blew water right through where the two pieces of aluminum are hooked together.
Yeah.
And it blew that water right through there. Because we had to go. I guess we went right through the heart of that hurricane, and we got through into the heart of the hurricane. It just blew water all over the mud. That was hot shit. But it did when we landed in the island in the Caribbean. By that time, the hurricane had hit that island too, and we were on a paved runway with a paved revetment that came out, and here we are. But that was made for smaller airplanes. That wasn't made for our size airplanes. And here we are with this big bomber, big lucky bomber, coming around and trying to get into the revetment that's off the main thing, and one wheel slipped off and went down into the mud, because that was just solid mud from that rain, and that wheel sunk right in. And it took two engines, the two engines and the wing, down into the mud too. And they had to come out with a crane and pick the plane up. And they picked the plane up and put it back on the revetment, and then we parked it. And I knew damn well that the wing had been bent a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The end of the wingtip had been bent a little bit, and everything else was okay. It seemed to be all right. So when the plane was picked up again, the wing went straight again. And so we were supposed to continue our flight the next day. So they sent an engineer out to look over the plane before we could go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so they looked over the plane. He said, "Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it. You're fine." I said, when there's an accident with a heavy bomber, I said, the first flight that plane takes, it takes with the person who said that plane was ready to fly. So you're going to have to go up in that plane first, the first pilot, and go around and see how it works. Oh, he said, don't worry about it. He said, you're all right. He said, that's okay. He said, you're all set to go. And there was nobody around to correct them, except me. And here I'm a crew member. He said, don't worry about it. So we went up into Brazil and landed in Belém, Brazil, which is right on the border, and it overlooks the Atlantic. That's where Belém is, and we found we were using a little bit more fuel from our trip in the Caribbean there. And outside of that, everything, the plane was perfect. It was in good shape.
Mm-hmm. And then you took off for overseas?
So then we loaded up, and overseas we go. And we went from when we were about two-thirds the way over, they a pilot and first pilot called up, and I come up with the engineer and transferring fuel. Mm-hmm. from you got 8 or 10 tanks. You got tanks above the bomb bay. Mm-hmm. You got tanks in the wing, and they had all of that gasoline has to be transferred to the 4 engines.
Okay, we're going to have to stop here. Okay, so you were about 2/3 over, and you had to transfer the fuel.
So we're transferring the fuel into the 4 engines,
mm-hmm.
And we thought we had done a pretty good job getting the gasoline into the 4 engines, and then there we were. There we were into French West Africa, and landed. We hit that runway. That was the first metal runway we had ever hit. The whole runway was hooked together.
Yeah.
Pieces of metal. We hit the runway. The runway screamed at us. Whee! Never heard a noise like that. And we got to the end of the runway, and we finally found a revetment to get off, and we are taxiing up to a place to stop, and we ran out of gas.
Oh, so you lucked out then?
We just got lucked out.
Wow.
We ran out of gas, and when we were going to park. It's a good place to run out of gas.
Definitely.
Particularly if nobody had ever flown the Atlantic in our crew, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We thought that was pretty good in the first place.
Yeah. So you landed there in Africa. How long did you stay there?
Well, we stayed there for about a day and a half,
mm-hmm.
and that was in French West Africa. Belém, French West Africa.
Now, what was that like? Was it really hot there and humid?
Yes, it was hot. It was very hot, and that was a place where they had the big tall guys, all the black people that are on basketball teams.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them came from Belém, or what was it, Marrakech, French West Africa, and they're all 7 feet tall.
Huh.
And they loved the French gave them beautiful uniforms that they loved, and they loved being in uniform. Boy, oh boy, and they were on the airfield. They were all the policemen. They were the
mm-hmm.
policemen.
They provided security for your aircraft?
And we were in tents there, and we walked from the tents, and they had stone things there. I had to get up at night and go to the bathroom, and I didn't know that there was even anybody there at night. But one of those big guys was standing in front, leaning up against the tree when I was walking by, and he came out, "Oh, hey, where are you going?" Across the body, I'm going to the bathroom, you know. What the hell's going on? So I went to the bathroom and back to the tent, and I told these guys, Christ, whatever you do when you go out there, you better watch out. But they got a voice, the guy got a voice that sounds like a trumpet. You know, he's 7.5 feet tall, looking down at you, it's, what the hell is going on? So we were there, and then the next thing we know, we flew from there to Casablanca.
Mm-hmm.
And the Germans were not too far out of Casablanca. They had pushed them back pretty far.
Mm-hmm.
And we flew out of there for a while, very short while. And then our next stop was just below Italy. And then the English had already gotten into Italy, and the Americans were not long after that.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did for the airplanes was to take big farms, the larger farms in France, in Italy, and to put runways in them. And make an airfield. That was an airfield.
Mm-hmm.
And they just cleaned everything up and whatnot. And we didn't disturb it. As far as being a farm was concerned, it was still a farm. Except we had a little place there, and then we did what we had to do in order to make it into an airfield.
Uh-huh.
Without really disturbing it that much. And what we put down, we were able to take up. Mm-hmm. And then it was a farm again.
Now, how many aircraft were parked in there?
A group, four squadrons mm-hmm. were in each group.
Now, what unit were you assigned to?
We were in the 758th Bomb Group and the 459th Bomb Squadron.
Mm-hmm. And what Air Force was that?
15th Air Force.
15th, okay.
15th Air Force. And it was a good place to fly out of. It was in the, as I say, it was in May.
This was May of...
well, this May, June.
Of 44, was it?
44. June of 44.
Okay.
And so we had a lot to do, and we were in the British sector. Mm-hmm. We were in the British sector. We were on the Adriatic coast of Italy.
Now, what were your missions like that you were flying?
They varied. They varied. We flew all the way up to Poland, mm-hmm. as far north as Poland, and
now these were bombing missions.
All bombing missions. And as far east as the Russian. We stayed off the Russian front, mm-hmm. but we flew that. Covered everything.
Now, what was your position on the airplane?
Okay. They said, I told you what they said to us. Did you know anything about cameras? Mm-hmm. Do we know anything about cameras? I said, yeah, I know something about cameras. I had lived in the Greenwich Village before the war, and there are a lot of artists and photographers and whatnot that lived down there, and they had the first the cameras some brand new cameras come out, and Graflex number 1, the Graflex number 2 came out, and I had bought a Graflex number 1 from cameraman who lived in the same apartment that I lived in, and he taught me how to use the camera, and told me that I'd have to develop my own film, and he came into my apartment and put up red lights, and so I was able to develop the film, and so that when I was asked questions about it, there I was in this bomb group, that I know anything about it. I told them what I knew. I wrote everything down about what I knew about cameras, and it turned out that the things that I had written about what I knew about cameras was more than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And they had 3 sets of cameras that were made by the Eastman Kodak people, and these cameras could photograph at 40 degrees below zeros, at altitudes of 34,000 feet.
Now you mentioned these were movie cameras?
Motion picture cameras.
Mm-hmm.
3 motion picture cameras that could take pictures at 40 degrees below zero.
Now, how much film was in each camera? I mean, if they were a movie camera, did you just stop and start, or did they run for a while till they ran out of film?
Oh, they ran for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And when the plane landed, guys come on and took the film out and processed it. And that night I came in and they interrogated me as to what was on the film.
I see.
What I had photographed, how I had photographed it. I photographed the target before the bombs hit.
Mm-hmm.
We flew around and photographed them again to see what the bomb pattern was of everybody else that flew in and dropped their bombs.
Now you were the only one that was doing that with the group.
The only one that was doing that, yeah.
Now what rank were you?
I was a staff sergeant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any rank for cameraman. Nobody. When I didn't do anything except camera work, and that was like my 3rd mission.
Uh-huh.
From then on, my rank just stayed exactly the same. And everybody else's rank did all kinds of things. But my rank stayed the same thing because they didn't have any rank for cameramen.
I see.
I was enjoying myself doing the camera work.
Now every time the unit went out on a mission, you would have to go too to do the...
I not only did I go out, but the ship that I was on,
Mm-hmm.
we had cut a hole out of the base of the ship behind the bomb section
Uh-huh.
to install the big camera on 4 springs that we used to photograph the target when the bombs were released and what the bomb pattern was and whatnot. And so we had to fly around and come back in and then photograph the target again after that whole bomb group.
Mm-hmm.
After the entire bomb group dropped its bombs, we came in and photographed everything after the entire pattern of bombs went down. So we knew how we had done on the target,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of hits we had. And so then they were able to take those films and then know precisely what they had hit, how they had hit it, and everything else. So that was a big plus, tremendous plus for them.
So there was just one airplane like that, so you flew on the same airplane all the time?
Same airplane all the time, deputy lead. We flew deputy lead. They put us right next to the lead ship. We were hooked right up to the lead ship.
Now, did your airplane have a name?
Yeah. ask me right now.
Okay. Now, was there any kind of nose art on the plane?
Any what?
Any kind of nose art, like some of them had,
certainly, yes.
like
Yeah.
painted women or cartoons on them?
In fact, when we got the airplane, we were going to go overseas in. We stopped in southern Miami, and they had an art crew. They had a whole art crew there that came up to the aircraft as they came in and painted on the front of the ship. And that's how we got the name of the ship. Was the I can't think of the name of the ship at the moment, but that's how the ship got its name. And
Now, did you wear a leather flight jacket?
No. That was the leather flight jacket was for low-level flying. At altitude, we had an electric suit that we wore.
Okay.
With electric stockings and electric gloves.
Did that suit work pretty well?
You plugged it in just like you plugged in your camera here.
Mm-hmm.
Plugged it into the wall.
And you had a little rheostat that controlled the heat?
No, there was just one heat.
Okay.
And that was like body temperature type heat. And those electric suits were turned in every time you landed from a flight. Those electric suits were turned in and examined. They were examined during the afternoon, and they had crews that probably stayed up, and they worked all during the night, making sure all of those electric suits were working properly. And you lost a glove, or you lost a shoe, or you lost the suit itself, if that went out, you were in bad shape. You were in bad shape when it's 40 degrees below zero.
Mm-hmm.
With the windows in the airplane open,
yeah,
and the bomb bays open, everything's open, no heat.
Mm.
No heat in those airplanes. No heat. No, nothing on the aircraft itself except the aluminum body. So it was goddamn cold,
mm-hmm.
very cold. Better not lose anything on that suit. So they kept those suits. They kept those suits in good shape. I've had a glove go out or something like that on them, but they pull the sleeve of the thing down and pull it over your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I had to do.
Was your ship ever under attack where it was hit with flak?
Yeah,
or?
we were fired on almost on every mission.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other thing that I filmed was the air war. As the German aircraft were coming in, filming that and filming flying over troop concentrations, gun emplacements, what's happening on the Danube,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of traffic is on the Danube, big carriers doing different things, and photographing all of that stuff. And there were 6 flights. In fact, there were 6 flights that our crew was on. That we were shot up so bad that we couldn't reach the target. And so we had to leave the formation, turn around, and come home alone.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you come home alone? We'd mostly fly down on the deck and fly as low to the ground as possible until we reached the Adriatic,
Uh-huh.
and then got over again.
Now, did you ever have an escort? I think with the 15th Air Force, there was that group of black airmen called the Tuskegee Airmen.
We had the Tuskegee Airmen flying us, and they were stationed in the Mediterranean,
Mm-hmm.
on one of the islands in the Mediterranean, and but they flew with us, our group and a couple of other groups, that the Tuskegee boys, and the Germans knew it, and we had our co-pilot. Our co-pilot was a kid from his mother and father were born in Germany, and they were living in Upper Manhattan in the German section of Upper Manhattan, and he knew German from listening to his father and mother talking German.
Mm-hmm.
And so he put them on, and he said you put on the German intercom playing. You'll hear them talking to one another, and you could hear the German fighter pilots. They were going, Mäschischen fighters, Mäschischen American fighters, Neger. They knew them, because they had knocked down a couple of them, and they knew the insignias on the plane. As soon as they shot down one or two of the aircraft, they knew how they were painted and the insignias on them, and you could hear them. Neger, 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 Mäschischen Neger. Christ almighty. Yeah, they were good men. They were good men now.
They never, I guess they never lost a single aircraft that they were escorting.
Don't ever believe that.
No?
Don't ever believe that they were never shot down.
Oh, no, but I mean, like, the planes they escorted,
we lost plenty of planes.
that they had escorted?
They lost plenty of them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We had, of our four squadrons, the 46th squadron, we were the 49th squadron. They had the 46th, 47th, 48th, and 44 squadrons. 46th squadron, they were shot down completely 3 times. I mean, every ship in that squadron was shot down 3 times. Our group, the worst we ever had, I think we lost 3 out of the 10 ships in our squadron. That was the most at one time.
Mm-hmm.
But out of the groups that went in with us, I got the plane with the kid from Saratoga home. He finished his tour of duty. We finished our tour of duty. But there were only about three of our group that had gone over originally. There were only three ships that had finished their tour of duty and come home.
Now, did you go home before the war in Europe ended?
Oh yeah, I was in Europe. I was in Europe. I was in Europe for 72 days. I put 51 missions in 72 days, and I had 6 aborts. So 50, 51, 57. I put 57 flights in 72 days. In Italy, in the summer. We hit one terrible thunderstorm coming back one day over the Alps. So we were coming over the Alps and ran into this thunderstorm. But that was the only That was the only rain that we ever had that stopped us from flying. Never missed a day.
Now, did you always fly with the same crew?
Same crew.
So you guys all came back together?
Well, we lost a couple of bombardiers and a waist gunner. But the rest of us made it all come back, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did you go back to the States?
On September, we got over there. I told you we got over there in May, June.
The 44.
44. September 21st, I think it was, or the September 22nd, we had finished our flights. And they flew us down to southern Italy, and we flew out of, and we took a ship
Mm-hmm.
back to the United States. It was a cruiser. It was the Queen of Bermuda, four-masted cruise ship
Mm-hmm.
that had been converted into a troop ship. But it was so fast that we didn't need an escort.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from southern Italy all the way through the Mediterranean and up the Atlantic to just north of Washington, D.C. to an airfield in Baltimore, in Maryland.
Uh-huh.
Big shipyard in Maryland. It's still a big shipyard.
Now, after you and the crew got back, did you got in? Obviously, you got some leave time. Did you? Were you sent to different places, or did you stay together?
What they did with us. They sent us to a resort in New Jersey, the biggest resort in New Jersey on the Atlantic coast.
Mm-hmm.
Forget the name of the.
Was it Atlantic City?
Atlantic City. That's what it was. Atlantic City, and they took one of the hotels and converted it for the kids who had the kids in New England and New York and New Jersey and who had come back from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And instead,
Okay.
and there we were in Atlantic City in the hotel, and we had a bar in it. It had everything too. We went into our rooms and food, just like you were at a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
You go down and you order what you want, except at the bar. When you ordered things at the bar, you didn't pay for anything. You didn't pay for anything that you drank. And I ran out of money there, and I had my stuff with me, and I told these people that I ran out of money. When I left the house, I had like $80 on me,
Mm-hmm.
and here I got down there, and it didn't take me. When I wasn't in the hotel, and I was doing other things in Atlantic City, which you'd want to do too.
Yeah.
I was spending money. So I asked him, I said, how do I get any money here? Oh, well, you go down on the first floor and you go to whatever it is, room 606, whatever it is, so I went down there and they asked me for my stuff, and I showed them who I was and whatnot, and they gave me
Like a partial pay?
like $200 or $200. They gave me $200. So
Mm-hmm.
they gave me the $200, and I took the $200 and left. And when I got back to my room, I opened it, my Army pay book, and they didn't stamp anything out. They gave me the $200, but they didn't stamp anything out on it. So about a week after that, I went back down there. I didn't say anything. I just said, "Oh, well, this is me, and I'm Bron Jenssen, and I won $200." And they gave me the $200 again. And I took everything, and I put everything back in my pocket, and I got back up into my room again, and I took everything out. They didn't stamp anything out on it. So we were there for about 6 weeks, I guess, 6 or 7 weeks.
Just staying in a hotel.
Yeah, and
you weren't working on aircraft or anything?
No, we just did whatever we wanted to do.
Wow.
And for some reason, I had a car with me. I guess one of my middle brother had left an automobile up at the house, and I drove it down to Atlantic City when I found out I was going to Atlantic City. So here I am on the boardwalk, and I took a handkerchief out of my pocket, and my car keys fell out of my pocket and fell through a crack in the boardwalk. And that boardwalk was about twice the distance of this roof up above the sand.
Uh-huh.
And here I am on the boardwalk, and there are my car keys that fell right where I was standing. And I looked over at the wall where there was they had flags up on the boardwalk, and I saw where a flag was, and where it was where I was standing, and at the other side. And I couldn't get off the boardwalk. You get steps going off the boardwalk about every 300 feet or.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to find out precisely where I was standing, and then to go out and walk down and go down into the sand and whatnot. And there was all kinds of stuff down there. There were old sofas down there. The goddamn things were underneath that boardwalk.
Hmm.
And I walked up to where I thought was the right place, and then walked over to where I thought the key was, and I looked down, and there was that key in the sand. The key was right. I walked right up to it. I don't know how the hell I ever did that. Picked the key up. That was that. Well, that ended. It was a lovely trip, and met a couple of gals and whatnot, and there were people there, and had dates, and everything was all right. And let's see what happened after that. Oh, yeah, we were shipped down to the Mexican border in Texas. Nuevo Laredo. Laredo, it's Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and Laredo, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a city that, right in the middle of the city, you walk and you're in Mexico. You walk the other way and you're in the United States. Went right through the city. So when you went over the border, you got Mexican food, and all Mexican stuff and whatnot, and you go to the other side, and you're back in Texas again. But they had marvelous things in Mexico. They had the stores were marvelous and had all kinds of things that you didn't have in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And all kinds of things made of silver, for instance, because they had all kinds of silver in Mexico. You went into a jewelry store. The things that you could get for very reasonable, $3 and $4 and $8. And I bought things for my mother and for my sister and whatnot, and went into another store where they had women's silk stockings. I looked at the silk stockings; they looked beautiful, gorgeous, and so I bought silk stockings and shipped those up to my mother and sister. And I didn't think about that until after the war. And one day we were having dinner or whatever it was, and I said, "Hey, what if I happened those silk stockings that I sent up from Mexico?" And my sister and mother said, we wore those stockings for weeks and weeks and weeks. You couldn't wear them out. They didn't run like the stockings we get up here. Had I known that, I would have gone back,
Yeah.
shipped up everybody on the block,
Now, you were down in Laredo, so there was a unit down there, or an airfield?
An airfield down there, right.
Mm-hmm.
And we were training kids
to go overseas.
to go overseas.
Oh.
And we got up on bombers, and what I did on those was man machine guns, and showed them how to shoot their machine guns out of the ship. And they had fighter planes that came in and made passes at us.
Mm-hmm.
And as they made the passes at us, we fired, and we fired a blank that just made dents on the things that we fired just made dents, not even a dent.
Oh, I see.
But they could see where they were hit.
Uh-huh.
They could see where they were hit, and they could just rub that off again.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what we did down there.
Now, you did that till the war ended?
No. That's we were doing that, and let me see, where did we go after that? Where did we go after that? I guess that we went up to Washington. I didn't do much. We didn't do much after that. That was the by that time that was the latter part of 44 rather. That was the latter part of 44, and the war was over in the first part of 45.
Well, actually, it ended in May of 45.
May of 45
in Europe.
Yep, and so I was home about 3 weeks after the war was over.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 weeks after the war was over, they shipped me out, and I was home.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
Oh yeah, oh yes, oh yeah. Oh, that was terrible. That was awful. Of course, he had a girlfriend down in Atlanta, and so he was spending a lot of time in Atlanta, and he died in one of his trips in Atlanta. He died in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was he was a tough one, and his sons never really never heard much of his children. He had boys.
No.
He had one daughter and I don't know, 3 or 4 sons. Nothing ever happened to them.
Was there any talk of, I know the war in Europe ended before they dropped the bombs in Japan, but was there any talk about you guys being shipped over to the Pacific?
They did. I didn't know it. I didn't know it. But they were shipping they were shipping kids who completed their tour of duty over there, Europe, or took them before they had completed their tour of duty, and shipped them over to the
Pacific Islands.
Pacific Islands, yeah. So they flew over there too.
Now, when the bombs were dropped on Japan and the war ended, were you in the service?
I was in the service. I was still in the service.
Was there a lot of celebration at that time?
There was. I wouldn't. Well, the atomic bomb, and the first one that hit, and then they dropped the next day or whatever, dropped the second one, and we had some kids over there, and they talked about the people who were flying and whatnot, but that was just between our groups. Someone from your group were over there. You know, oh, they were, huh? Or they are, you know, and what are they doing? But we were still in the.
And they discharged you about 3 weeks after it ended?
Not much after that.
Do you recall when you were discharged?
Yeah, I have it in here. Somewhere in here. Let me see.
Well, the war ended in August, so you probably got discharged probably in September or October?
I think it was still in August.
In August?
I think it was still in August when I was discharged, yeah.
Now, once you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill?
I did. I'm sure I did. I went back to studying art. Studying art at the Art Students League in New York on 57th Street, and I'd gone there before the war. I'd gone up there where I was working in Manhattan. The guy that I was working with, I told you that I was doing work for the big radio people, and I asked the guy for a raise. I asked him for a raise. He said, I'm not going to give you a raise. I said, what? I said, you're not going to give me a raise? He said, no, for the paintings that you make here in the studio here, paintings that you've made out of the windows during your lunch hour. Lunch hour, instead of going to lunch, what the hell do? You put an easel up in the window and you start making paintings of the 2nd Avenue L and this, that, and the other thing, and the Empire State Building and the East River, and the ships coming up the east. What the hell are you doing? He said, I'm not gonna. He said, I'll give you something that's a hell of a lot more expensive than that. He said you go up to the Art Students League on 57th Street, and that's the finest art school in the world. And you go up there and that's what I'll give you. And on night you go up 5 nights a week. 5 nights a week up there. So I was going to the Art Students League for like 15 hours a week, and I was working 35 hours a week down on 40th Street, and I was walking up. So I got out at 5 o'clock, and I didn't have to be at the Art Students League until 7 o'clock. So I was finding places to have dinner, and I had to walk past the Waldorf Astoria. So I figured I'm going to go into the Waldorf Astoria, and if I'm not going to have dinner, I'm going to have a good drink anyway. So I went into the Waldorf Astoria. men's bar of the Waldorf Astoria. Little did I know, at night, the men's bar of the Waldorf Astoria, you had the best food of all of Manhattan. They had sliced ham, sliced chicken, or hot food,
Mm-hmm.
and seafood, shrimp. They had shrimp out, and all kinds of stuff out. And you go up with a plate and fill it up, and you take it back and sit down, and you have your cocktail. I couldn't get food like that in any place else in Manhattan. It was free.
Just for buying a drink.
Just for buying a drink. So that's what I did every night. Every night I couldn't wait to get up to the Waldorf. And I had my sketchbook with me because I'm on my way up.
Uh-huh.
And I got to know some of the men, the other people that came in for cocktails and for dinner. And I was making portraits, sketching portraits of them, you know. And
Like caricatures too?
caricatures.
Uh-huh.
I'll show you just a couple of things that I do. Pussycats.
Oh, hold that out and I can focus in on it.
Well, I have better ones than that.
Oh, what? Oh, I'm getting a lot of... I think you're a little too close to the... Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's nice.
Okay, but I've got better pussycats than that. Here's a nice pussycat.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. There's a dog and a cat.
Oh, okay. That's really great. Try not to hold it too close to the light.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, very nice.
That's a rabbit.
Oh, yeah. I think if you just hold it in front of you, it's good. Oh, yeah, that's better. Oh, that's great. Nice. Now, how long does it take you to do one of those?
Oh, 20 minutes.
Really?
These are caricatures.
No, hold it in front of you.
Oh no, you don't want to see that.
Huh?
You don't want to see the caricatures.
Oh, sure.
They're my favorites.
Nice. Okay.
Oh, these are just sketches.
Get some of the flowers.
Yeah, these are some of my wife's flowers here. Much better artwork than this. Guess I'll have to take those out and do this.
Okay.
These are all flowers that from her garden, and as she takes them in and puts them in a bowl.
Mm-hmm. You sit and sketch them.
Didn't sit and sketch them out. Pen and ink, full paintings.
Oh, really nice. Looks like a photograph through the camera.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Only better.
Do you ever exhibit any of your work?
Oh yes, yeah. I've had my studio in New York for 30 years.
Uh-huh.
I'm the best artist in the Tri-City area. That's not saying a hell of a lot.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
That's not saying a hell of a lot. But I've got many more than these. But the other ones I have up in the studio. This is the second group. Moving them too fast.
No, that's all right.
Coming down near the end. Near the end now. That's it. That's it.
Okay. Excellent.
So that's it.
Now, when you get done there, you also have a nice letter that you were telling me about.
Oh yes.
It's in a frame. Now, you want to tell us how that came about?
This. This is a letter that came to me. The 6th of April of this year,
Mm-hmm.
from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Washington, D.C. Mr. Bron Jenssen, 20 Lido Road, Albany, New York. Dear Mr. Jenssen, across this nation and in the halls and memorials around the world, depictions of the bravery and the great services of the Allied. You can read that better than I can, but I don't have my glasses on. Go ahead, you can read it.
Is that all right?
Sure.
As an airman of the 758th Bombardment Squadron Heavy, you are a significant part of this commendable history. Flying some of the most difficult missions of World War II, such as Operation Dragoon, the Allied invasion of southern France, you and your comrades not only helped to liberate a continent, but inspired hope for generations to come. Thank you for your service during one of our nation's greatest call to action. Battle streamers adorning the 758th, pay fitting tribute to your unit's distinguished World War II service, and today's airmen of the 758th Airlift Squadron continue this inspirational combat legacy as they fight to support the people of Iraq and Afghanistan. On behalf of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the more than 2 million men and women of our armed forces, I'm proud to offer my heartfelt gratitude for your service. Sincerely, M.G. Mullen, Admiral, U.S. Navy.
Wonderful.
And that came about because...
If you just hold that up, I can zoom right in on it.
Okay.
And how did that come about?
My son out in Los Angeles is next door neighbor to a man who works for the Pentagon. And after telling him about Bron's military experience, the man said, if I could get Commander Mullen to write a letter, would he like that? And Eric said, oh yes. And that's how the letter came to be, which was quite a circuitous route.
Ah, very nice. Excellent. All right, well, thank you so much for your interview.
We took up more time than you ever expected.
No, it was fine.
Is that all right?
Excellent. Thank you again.
Okay.
Bron is a storyteller.
He certainly is.
I am a storyteller.